Hello crafters, thank you for stopping by. In this video, I'm showing how to make hidden panel cards using stamps and coordinating dies. No specialty dies are used for this, and you should be able to make a hidden panel card like this one using most stamps and coordinating dies you have in your stash. Some will work better than others, of course, but this technique is not limited to the stamp set that I'm sharing in this video. Speaking of the set that I'm playing with, it's an adorable animal signs stamp set from Pretty Pink Posh from their April 2019 release. I'm also using a couple other new products from Pretty Pink Posh today. Here I have a panel of light blue cardstock and a giraffe coordinating die. When we make cards, we do not typically start with a coordinating die, but for this hidden panel card, you'll want to use the die first. I've positioned my die in the center of the panel, and the panel is cut to 4 1/4 by 5.5 inches. It will make the front of my card. You can have the die anywhere on the panel you like. I've taped mine in place using low-tack tape, so it's going to stay put for a little bit. Next, I brought in my die cutting machine. This is Spellbinder's Deep Sea die cutting machine, but any die cutting machine will work for this. Depending on how you want the hidden panel to be revealed, you might need to use a machine with a 6-inch opening. That's the one that I'm using today. For example, for this card layout, the 4 1/4 inch opening or 4.5 inch opening die cutting machine will not work. I've assembled my cutting plates and I made sure the top cutting plate is not covering my die completely. We need to do partial die cutting and just partially cut this giraffe in the panel. Having the top cutting plate not cover the die all the way will allow us to do so. So I'm just going to run this through my machine and voila, the partial die cut is ready. Now we need to create a hinge. For this, I'm using my scoring board and just adding a score line where that cut line should have been. This created a fun giraffe-shaped door on our panel. This door will hide a panel with a secondary message on our card. Super easy, and that's why I mentioned that most stamps and coordinating dies will work for this technique. Next, I'm going to work on my front panel to dress it up a little bit. Here I have a stencil from Pretty Pink Posh, and I want to clear heat emboss this stencil design over the panel for a tone-on-tone look. You do this pretty much as regular heat embossing, but instead of inking the stamp, because we don't have a stamp, you ink up an ink blending tool and blend clear embossing ink through the stencil. I sometimes like to pounce the ink on the paper and the stencil instead of blending, especially if the stencil that I'm using is very detailed and delicate. But here my stencil is nice and sturdy, so I can easily ink blend the ink onto the paper. By the way, if you're new to my channel, let me introduce myself. I'm Yana Smakula, and I love to make cards. I'm hoping you enjoyed this tutorial. If you do, please give it a thumbs up and subscribe to my channel. Ring the bell too to be notified of every new upload. Having applied the embossing ink, I removed the stencil and I'm going to add clear embossing powder onto the paper and of course, heat set it. I didn't pay much attention to inking up the partial die cut area as it will be covered with an actual stamped image, so no need to add embossed design there. With the background panel ready, I'm going to work on the image that will go on the front of my card. It's this darling giraffe that's holding a sign. I find him to be super hilarious. I also want to dress him up a little bit, and for this, I will use an image of a tie from the Father's Day mini stamp set from Pretty Pink Posh. It's a cute set with several images to be used for Father's Day and masculine cards. I die cut the giraffe out, and now to color him, I'm using several colors of Copic markers. Nothing special, just some basic blending and coloring. The colors I'm using are E37, E33, E31, E51. I also used B05 and B02 to color the frame, and also C1 and C3 to color inside of the frame, and E79 as the darkest brown marker for this giraffe. Now, if you wanted to, you can actually have a little picture or something else included in the frame, but I knew that my frame would be overlapped by a tie, so I left it blank. I also stamped some star-shaped balloons. These come from the Elephant Friends stamp set from Pretty Pink Posh, and I'm using BG32, BG11, and B000 markers to color the balloons. I also later colored a yellow balloon to go with some of the yellow accents on this card. Time to stamp our secret message. I'm using the Happy Father's Day sentiment from the Father's Day stamp set. That's the same set where I'm using the tie from. Now, the size of this message is actually perfect to hide behind the giraffe, so it's going to make my hidden panel. Now, to align the front panel over the stamping, I'm going to add generous amount of foam tape to the back of the front panel, open the partial die cut window, and adhere the blue panel over the white one. You can also die cut the shape with a sentiment and simply inlay it into the window, but I wanted to have a solid panel here instead. Now you can see that the sentiment panel is actually clearly too big, so I'm using my scissors to trim the excess, and I'm actually pushing my scissors under the background panel a little bit to cut a bit more of the paper off. So this basically is what the technique is. You use a stamp and coordinating die. With the help of the die, you make a partial cut to create a door on a hinge, so to speak. You hide a message behind that door and use the stamp and die to decorate the front of the card. And this, of course, can be used all year round, not just for Father's Day cards, but also for birthday, encouragement, and many other kinds of projects. I adhered my front panel onto an A2 white side folding card base, and then I started decorating the card front. To do this, I foam mounted the giraffe die cut onto the partial die cut flap. Originally, I wanted this card to be monochromatic, just blue, but later I decided that I wanted to add yellow to make it more fun. I stamped and colored another tie using yellow markers, and I used Y17, Y35, and Y11 colors, and I later used same colors to color another yellow balloon. I adhered the tie using glue. I wanted to use foam adhesive squares here, but really didn't want to make this card two-dimensional as I already had 2 layers of foam adhesive on the card. Next, I attached these star-shaped balloons using glue and foam adhesive. Now, I did cut the string where it overlapped the flap so that the flap would open and close freely. And I also needed to add an extension to the string to the yellow balloon, and I did that by using a string from a spare balloon that I had made. Finally, I wanted to make a closure element for the flap as it was kind of popping open all the time. And I also needed a place for another sentiment because I wanted to have some sort of message on the front of the card, not just a hidden sentiment. So I kind of killed 2 birds with 1 stone by making a movable closure that was also a sentiment. I first stamped the "You're Amazing" in black ink on yellow cardstock, and this sentiment comes from the Animal Science stamp set. It's the same set where the giraffe is from. I trimmed it into a small banner. Next, I cut a small square from light blue cardstock, and it's the same color of cardstock I used for the background. I made the square just a tiny bit smaller than the yellow panel. Using my tool-in-one piercer, I poked a hole in both yellow banner and the blue square, and then I inserted a small brad through both paper pieces. Who knew I'd still be using brads these days? I feel like brads are such an old embellishment, but hey, they are a great tool for things like this. Now, the legs of the brad that I used were too long, so I trimmed them using my wire cutters. Next, I placed a large foam square over the blue square and used that to adhere the closure element onto the card. Because I added foam adhesive to another piece of cardstock to that blue square and not yellow, this allowed the yellow piece to move freely. Lastly, I wanted to add character to my giraffe, so I used a white pen and added stripes to his tie, and later I added tiny eyes to make him a bit more charismatic. Card is done. Whether you're making a card for your dad, maybe for your hubby, or your son, I hope you'll give this idea a try. I look forward to making a few hidden panel cards for my girlfriends and including some secret messages on the inside. Thanks for watching. Subscribe now not to miss any new card making videos. I'll see you next week. Bye!